Morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I suppose 9 o'clock on a Friday morning is a little early for some folks, but I'm not going to let that daunt us because I am deeply excited to hear from one of my favorite New Hampshire activists, Laurie Ortolana. I don't even remember how she ran across my vision or whatever, but I just heard about this lady down in Nashua who is doing this incredible work with Right to Know. I believe Right to Know, which is basically New Hampshire's open government laws, it's called RSA 91A. We have really good constitutional protections, and then we have this bill, but I believe that keeping our government open is probably our best shot at keeping our government, our local government accountable, and this lady is on the front lines. Laurie Ortolana was the 2023 First Amendment Award honoree. This is an award that is being given out now by the Naki Loeb School of Communications. They are affiliated. Naki Loeb, of course, was from the Union Leader originally, and they honor New Hampshire individuals or groups who have advanced or exercised their First Amendment rights in some special or extraordinary way. I'm a little bitter about the award because I honestly thought I should have won it when I won my big case years ago, but I'm gonna let that slide. Maybe someday I could serve on the board or help judge or something like that. Laurie will be talking about her Right to Know court cases and her successes against the city of Nashua. Afterwards, we'll also be participating in a panel discussion with Greg Sullivan from the Union Leader. He's an incredible First Amendment lawyer. Everyone should know him. He's the guy to ask the hard questions to. So without further ado, please help me welcome Laurie Ortolana.
I'm going to be cognizant of my time and set my stopwatch so I know where I am. Thank you very much for having me here as a guest speaker. It's really an honor to participate in the Liberty Forum event. I have been very active in Right to Know down in Nashua, and it happened really unexpectedly. I served, just to give you a little background, I lived in Litchfield for 23 years, and I served on the school board and the budget committee for about 7 or 8 years, in my early 30s till almost the age of 40. I homeschooled, my husband and I homeschooled our 2 sons, elected to homeschool because the older one was struggling with some reading issues in kindergarten at that time. That was a private venture. And I didn't feel the school was being receptive to addressing his needs to get the reading issues resolved. So we decided, my husband and I, to take it on ourselves. And it really worked out well. The 2 sons are very different learners and very different people. One of them is a bookworm, the oldest one, who speaks 7 languages and lives in Amsterdam, and the younger one is a hands-on mechanic, heavy equipment guy who runs a manufacturing plant for heavy machinery for injection molding down in Charleston, South Carolina. So they both launched out of the house and went their directions, and they have interesting lives. It was an interesting choice for me, and it was interesting because I served on the school board while homeschooling my kids, and I was able to get elected 4 times, and I think I was a really unbiased participant in the board because it was never about my children per se, and I never used that board seat to advocate for a style of learning. It was everyone's choice on what they could do. And we just did what we did because it was the right thing for our sons, and it worked out well. So that's a little bit about my background. In my work on the school board and my work in Litchfield, we had some Right to Know issues pop up over there. But I think what you see when you're in a smaller town, they're more receptive to addressing those issues because they don't have legal teams on staff. They use hired outside sources to address their legal needs, and they tend to be more aware of the spending. And so they want to resolve things, they want to mediate and before I got on the school board, we were challenging various records really without writing formal right to knows. I think I wrote one over there, and the school superintendent was actually very receptive, and we resolved our issue very quickly. And then I got elected and became I was very much an advocate when I was on the board to have records open and to do more in Litchfield to open records. And then I had my quiet phase where things were all about raising kids and family. I'm an engineer, went to WPI, worked in engineering for 10 years, did some consulting projects with DARPA for a few years as a consultant, and then I retired out and worked. My job was my family. So, and I was very much homebound. So I moved to Nashua in 2013, bought a home where the assessment just rocketed, and within a month of buying the home, the property taxes had gone up $5,000, and it was unexpected, and it launched me into a search for answers and a quest to fix something that I saw as unjust, which actually started in 2018. 2014, I saw it as a problem. 2017, I called the chief of assessing and said, hey, things are really wrong. My tax bill's $18,000 on my street. My average tax bill on the street of all nice homes is, $8,000. Something's really wrong here. And I was told, you bought it, you own it, you pay for it, don't bother us. And I said, you know what? I'm going to be watching you closely for a year. And when the new numbers came out, that unleashed me at that point. So I'm going to start by telling you a little story about Nashua and our aldermanic body and our view of records. Nashua is, the second largest city in the state. It produces a lot of revenue for the state. It has a lot of delegates up at the House, 27. It's powerful. And they have a lot of taxpayer money, and they have their own legal staff of 4 attorneys. So they're willing to fight a lot harder to keep you from getting information. And the Board of Aldermen, we tend to be a one-party city now, a fully Democratic city. We had, a matter of fact, our House is 27 Democrats. So we don't have a seat that represents an independent or Republican or anyone else. So it's very aligned, and I would say it's not too open to representing the makeup of Nashua. Many, I think 50% of the citizens are undeclared in Nashua. There's a lot of confusion about your party today, where you belong, where you fit, whatever side you're on. And, there's a lot of confusion about that. So, and there's a lot of voices that want to be heard, and I think the single party voice is missing out on the representation of our community. And I was going to board meetings very actively from 2019 till COVID hit, and we went into Zoom meetings. And from 19 and until COVID hit, we had a press presence in Nashua. The union leader and the Telegraph would come to the Board of Aldermen meetings. In the chambers, something like this, circular horseshoe, and in the back was a little alcove with a table for the press, elevated. And it was union leader, Telegraph. And the press people could sit there with their computers. There was power back there, and they could type away and write their stories for the paper the next day. In comes COVID. The press is really demolished by that, and we go to Zoom meetings. And when we start opening the chamber back up with mass people coming in to see meetings, the press was gone. And they never came back. So it's a really sad thing to see. It really is. It's a profound change in how our cities are being watched. Manchester does better because they have a dedicated paper, the union leader. The Telegraph all but disappeared. It went down to a huge building with a press room that would fit over 100 writers, was down to 2. So the chamber all of a sudden became empty, and after we opened up with COVID, I was the only one going. I would be the only citizen sitting there. So I would bring my computer and I would go back to the press table. Nobody was there. Sit there with my computer, type, get up, give public comment, participate, hang out. And after a couple months, the board chair said to me, "You can't sit at the press table. You're not the press." I said, "Well, nobody's at the press table. They don't come anymore. It's just a big open table. I bring my computer, I want to work." "No, not permitted. You have to sit in the bench." I ignored her. I said, "Well, that's just silly. I'm going to come back." And the next meeting I came back and I sat at the press table. And multiple board members got angry. They shouted at me, "You're not the press. You can't sit at the press table. It's wrong. Get off the press table." I said, "There's nobody here. I'm the only one. I'm sitting at the press table. I don't really care." So they fumed. They fumed at the lack of decorum I showed in their venue. So the next meeting I come, I bring my computer. The chairs have been removed. They're gone. So I went out in the hallway. It's the second floor, and right next to the mayor's office is a little table with 2 chairs. So I grabbed one of those blue chairs, and I walked in, and I plopped it at the press table, and I sat myself down. And they were red-faced. "How dare you move a chair?" So I said, "Well, it's out in the hallway. I need a chair." I said, "It's more comfortable for me. I like this spot, and there's nobody here." So they spoke about how they might have to make some rules, firmer rules about what the public can do, where we can sit when we come in there. So the next meeting I come in, all the chairs have been removed. The chairs out at the mayor's table are gone, and the chairs at the table are gone. So I went downstairs. I saw the lady in charge. I talked to the janitor. I go, "Where are the chairs?" He goes, "They made me lock them in the closet." I said, "You're kidding me." He goes, "No, they don't want you sitting at the table." I said, "Okay, next meeting I'm bringing my own chair, my folding chair. I'm coming in." So I brought my folding chair in, and I walked in outraged. It was just, the vice chair said, "Don't you think you're so special? You don't have to sit in the bench. You bring your own chair." I said, "I happen to have fallen and I injured my tailbone, and your hard benches are terribly uncomfortable. My softer plastic chair with the little cushion is much better for me, so I'm using my own chair." Outraged again, outraged. So they said, "Listen, you're not the press. You have no rights to sit at the press table." I said, "The table isn't even labeled. There's nothing on it." I said, I see no problem here. I'm going to continue to take my notes and participate." So, but the press table was such a big thing, I called Granite Grok, and I had written for them, and I said, "Hey, would you guys give me a press pass?" I said, "I think if I could get a press pass, I could write to them and say, 'Hey, I'm official. Put 2 chairs back, I'm there.'" So I went and got a press pass. And I wrote an email to the board, and I said, "I'm official. All of your problems have just disappeared. Your irritation should lift and be gone. I'm going to write some press articles for you." And then I went to the board meeting, and they removed the table. The whole thing was gone. And Corporation Counsel said, "I think we should put a legal library back there." And I was like, "I think you should put some right-to-know books and First Amendment right books back there and take the time to start reading them, because you people are just off the wall." So they beat me, but it just shows you the ridiculousness organizations will go to, and the pettiness to try to run somebody out or restrict them from participation when there is so little participation. It was a telling thing. And my early experiences in the assessing office, was all about going down, researching, getting data to try to figure out how to fix my assessment. I filed an abatement. When I first went to the assessing office in 18 and early 19, the staff, the 4 women that ran the front office, were so friendly, so helpful. They really liked me, I felt. I felt very welcomed. And a matter of fact, the chief who was running the office was only coming to work 2 days a week. Nobody knew why. The office was not being managed at all. And one of the ladies would make a comment when I'd come in. She'd go, "Oh, our fearless leader just showed up, Laurie." And I would do my research, and they would help me. Nothing was really computerized outside for citizens to use through their home. You had to go and use these 2 computers. Terrific. And then all of a sudden in 2019, the mayor's chief of staff they fired the assessing chief because of some things I raised on what was going on in the office. He was removed in March, and in comes the mayor's chief of staff. She's been promoted to an administrative service director and head of assessing with no background whatsoever. She starts writing directives. She holds staff meetings, and she starts listing right on her list. No one's to talk to Laurie Ortolana. No one's to service Laurie Ortolana. My name is on the agendas. And one of the very nice ladies in the office tipped me off and said, you might want to get those agendas because they're very interesting. And from that point, the women in the office were told to shun me as soon as I walked in. Just sit there, head down, don't service her, don't talk to her, don't give her anything. And they started compiling a lot of records on me. And they called the press maybe in July or August that year, and ran a story that Laurie Ortolana was overburdening the city with her right to know requests and a request for records in an assessing office. And they took boxes, I'm talking like 20 boxes of records they claimed I had pulled, and had the Telegraph come and take a huge front page above the crease photograph of it. And when the young man called me to speak, I was mortified. I mean, I really almost wanted to fold and say, oh, this was the worst thing in the world to me. I was embarrassed. I didn't want to be viewed as a problem. It was horrifying. And I said to the reporter, I don't want to say anything. And he goes, listen, I want to run a story on you. I want your side. Talk to me and give me a story on you. And so I gave him the story. And he ran a very unbiased and frankly flattering story for me. I was really happy with the way the story came out, noting that her work was proper, not overburdensome. She was in an assessing office. And, I won. I persisted on digging for records. I filed a right to know lawsuit in the assessing office in February of 2020, early on. I wasn't able to get that through a ruling until 2022, early on. I had an order from the court because COVID had slowed it down, and it was just a mess. And the city continued to violate right to know requests heavily. Even when the lawsuit went in, I thought things would calm down. That ratcheted them up. They were angry, and so they were going to dig in more. So I had representation with an attorney at that time, and I brought him new claims, and I'm like, I want to file these separate. He said the judge will consolidate. He goes, we need to amend. And I said, I don't want it amended. I don't want this big case. I want my individual case heard, and I just want to keep it small because it'll be too expensive. The judge did amend and amend. We amended 3 times. The last thing was trying to get police records when they came to my home and threatened me, and I'll explain how the police got introduced to me, and I got introduced to the police. And that made the whole thing very unruly. I sunk $225,000 into that case, and I have an award from the judge to get $67,000 back. That's an appeal to the Supreme Court, and I should have a ruling out sometime next year. But in 2025, I should have a ruling on records and costs that I incurred that started in 2019. That's very depressing to me for citizens like us trying to get into the system. It's very, very difficult. So, and as I dug in more, I was really committed to fixing our property. We had overpaid about $30,000 in 5 years on our property taxes relative to our neighbors. That was a lot of money. I wasn't willing to sit there and say, do it again when the new numbers come out. I was not willing to accept that. And I so wanted to mediate with my city, but they were not receptive to mediation at all. The rules of abatements are, once you file an appeal, I couldn't get through the abatement process the way I wanted to. They wouldn't correct the property. They brought it down a little bit, like $7,000. That was pretty small. I was looking for like 100 taken off of it. So 7 just didn't work at all. So I filed the appeal with the Board of Tax and Land Appeal. I decided to go that route instead of into court because court was teaching me a lesson about what costs could be. So into the appeal process I go, and part of the appeal process is you have to mediate. And I remember going, it was Valentine's Day of 2019 that I went in for our mediation with the city with my attorney, and they just wouldn't budge. They didn't even have the documents prepared for us to review, to talk about where the city stood on the numbers, nor would they accept any kind of offer. And we said, we'd like to leave the door open and come back and talk to you again if you're willing. And I remember walking out, and my attorney said, that was the worst negotiation I have ever been in my life. He goes, they hate you. They are never negotiating with you again. Don't even think they're coming to the table. So I was like, and for me, I've always been this glass half full person, and I've always been a negotiator. I grew up in a family of 4 sisters. My oldest sister was very handicapped. She was bitten by a mosquito carrying encephalitis and was brain injured at 3. And I roomed with this sister my whole life for 18 years. And she was a negotiating, she enhanced my negotiating skills. Frankly, she won a lot because her emotional center was brain injured, and she needed somebody to room with her that would be patient. And my parents knew I had a lot of patience, and I would be able to share a room with her for my years at home. And I did. And I considered myself a great negotiator. I had to do, and I was a middle child. So I really wanted to negotiate. I felt like it was the way to go. It's the way to be reasonable. It's the way to control costs. I don't want to see all my tax dollars going toward this. And the city should feel the same. And I really underestimated how much they didn't feel the same. And, that this was a, win at any cost, winner take all game. So, as my records work went on in 2019, in September, I received a knock at the door of my home from the police. And they said, we need to, my husband was home, and he said, oh, she's over at her friend's house. And they said, well, can you contact her and tell her we need to speak to her right away? So my husband called, and he says, this isn't good. I said, well, I'm half mile from the police station. I'm going to drive over there to the lobby and see what's going on. And I did. And 2 officers came out and said, we're issuing you a warning effective today that you are to have no contact with anyone in the assessing office if they're outside the office. You can't talk to them in the hallway. You can't talk to them in the parking lot. You are to have no conversation, otherwise you're subject to arrest. And I didn't even understand it. I said, is this really legal? I was like, is this even possible? They go, oh yeah, we do it all the time. I said, you do? And it just was stunning to me, and it was very frightening to me because I'd never been involved with the police. I had never even had a speeding ticket. I mean, I had no police record at all. So to have the police saying that you're going to be subject to arrest talking to assessing people was just stunning. And I said, one of the ladies calls me every week. I said, she reported, he said, everyone in the assessing office reported they want no contact with you. I said, you actually talked to everyone? And they said, yes. I said, and this woman said she doesn't want contact with me? I just talked to her yesterday. I mean, he goes, no, not her. We didn't talk to her. You can talk to her. But the rest of them, the other 7, no. And I remember at the end, the officer looks at me and he goes, do you have any questions? And my candid remark was, I have a shit ton of questions. I go, and the officer burst out laughing. He thought that was hilarious. He just thought it was so funny. I go, but I'm going to have to go to my lawyer and figure out how to ask these questions because I don't even know what's going on here. And I went home, and when I told my husband, he was so upset. I mean, now my husband, who's very straight-laced, Navy nuke guy, runs a big corporation in Worcester, he's like, oh, you know what? I remember him going to the basement, and my son was still living at home, and he opened the door and he said, Vincent, your mother's in trouble with the police. So are you now. You get it? Because he drove a hot rod. He was a car kid, and he had a WRX lowrider boosted to 500 horsepower, and he loved his cars. And my husband would put him on a professional racetrack in a high-powered car and let him fly at 150 miles an hour. So he's like, your mother's in trouble, now you're in trouble. So everyone straighten up in this house. So And then I went to my lawyer, and he goes, "Oh, I hate it when they do this." He goes, "I really hate it when they sick the police on people." So we added that to our suit, and we went after records. The police at that time were actually conducting an investigation in the assessing office that I had asked for, because one of the assessors I had discovered was not doing his job. He was sleeping in parking lots. He was signing out on the whiteboard that he was inspecting properties, and actually he was sleeping in parking lots at the Holiday Inn and in the rail trail with his personal computer. And when I pulled his police records, he had been caught in City Hall using over 8,000 images of porn on his computer twice, and the second time it was considered and concerned, there was concerns that it was child porn, and he went into an investigation. They released him and said it wasn't, but he said, "Hey, I'm a porn addict. I do this for hours a day. I don't do my work. I just stay on the city computers and load up these images." And they left him as an employee. Okay, so he got to stay. So after I uncovered that, and you know what happened? I was digging down in the office, and I kept seeing his property cards and records come up, and they were very incomplete, and they were not right. Now, I'm an engineer by background. I was an analytical engineer. So to me, this was like a data euphoria that I was having a ball. It was like, wow, this is so much fun. I can see all this data, and I can put it into my own little spreadsheets and import it, and I can run some analysis and who's doing what. And this guy was not doing his job. I was absolutely convinced. And I went to the lady who took over the assessing office, and I said to her, "Listen, I'm really concerned about these cards and what's going on here. He's not capturing permits. He's not doing his work. These assessments are not right." And I remember she put her hand up right in my face. She said, "You can't talk about any employees. We don't accept any negative remarks about employees. You have to keep it to yourself." I said, "Well, who am I supposed to talk to?" Not us. Not us. We don't take it. So I went to the board meeting, and I shared it in the board meeting. Well, then they were outraged. I criticized a employee in a board meeting. Well, they said, "Well, you don't allow us to go anywhere. Where am I going to go? I tried to do it privately, but you don't accept it." So, and at that point, I was so frustrated by it doesn't matter, that I hired a PI. Now, never in my life have I hired a PI. Never. But I spent $8,000, and I hired a really good PI out of the New Hampshire prosecutor's office who had been there like 10 years. And I said, "I need your help. Help me figure out where this guy's going," because he signs out at 11:30 every day and comes back at 4 with no papers, no nothing. He's just gone 4 hours almost every day. What's he doing? I said, "He's not working." It took us a while to crack the code. He knew he was being followed, man. He was skirting all over the place, and I had to get involved. My PI's like, you gotta follow him from City Hall. You gotta help me get him down to where we think his route is, because he took the same route every day. Every day he signed up for properties, he took the same route. So, and we caught him. We caught him in the rail trail, finally, and I did it for a month, and I had 7 incidences. So I thought with 7 incidences, it was enough to say, okay, we got a pattern here, we got an issue. The guy wrote up such a professional report. I remember the police seeing it and calling me saying, "You spent good money on this. It's really well done." The city threw it in the trash. And the guy stayed. And he actually retired about 4 months ago with his pension. And he's gone. What it did do, though, is it really scarred the office, because around the state and among assessors, it was not viewed well. And the Assessing Standards Board and the Department of Revenue got involved and sanctioned him. The city wouldn't sanction him, but the DRA did, and they stripped him of his license. He had been promoted to a supervisor. They removed it. He never went back. He had to do, 3 or 4 different classes, a lot of training to get it back. He never did the training. He didn't want it back. He wrote it out for a couple years to take his retirement and go. And our assessing office in Nashua had 10 employees. It went down to 1. And any attempt to hire, they couldn't get anyone to come in, because this guy was the one. And nobody wanted to come work with an individual like that. They didn't find merit in that. So we now use Vision as a contracted service in Nashua to handle our property assessments, which is very unusual for a bigger city or town to not have their own internal resources. So we're now out on contracted external resources. But because I had pushed and the city threw the report in the garbage, I went to the police and I said, hey, I feel he was, embezzling funds because he's submitting mileage reports for work done, getting reimbursed. And I said, this isn't right. I think we need to address this. So the police started the investigation, but what I realized is very early on, within a couple of months, I had a conversation with the officer who actually gave me the warning, and I could tell it had turned. It wasn't an investigation on them, it was an investigation on me. And suddenly I was not patient, I was too demanding. The city was making changes and I wasn't giving them enough time. And I was like, oh, this has a bad feel. And then the police showed up at the door probably a month after that to issue their warning. And then the use of police force continued for 2 years. They tried to arrest me probably 5 times. And so in 2021, I went to the assessing office to get abatement. 2020, was it? It was right before, 2021. We were still closed with COVID. Nashua had one of the most restrictive COVID policies in the state. Our schools were closed the longest, our masks were worn the longest, and our city hall was closed very long, for 18 months with no access. So in 2021, as they were lifting some things, it was abatement season, and I had some senior citizens called me and said, hey, we're afraid to go in, we can't do our abatements, we're too old, can you help us? I said, if you sign me as a representative, I'll help you with those two. So they signed me on the form as a representative, and I had to get them, they legally have to be date stamped and time stamped because they become a quasi-official judicial record if you're going to go to appeal from the abatement process. And the city always had a process for you to do that. Well, when COVID hit, the city didn't put a process in line. And actually, a lot of people were frustrated, like, how do I get my stuff stamped? Where do I go? Manchester had a clerk right at the front door during abatement season, so any citizen who wanted their abatement documents, officially stamped, could just come to Manchester City Hall, just enter the foyer, get the stamp, turn in their records, get a copy, and go home. So they were officially given. So, but Nashua would not. I requested they do that. I said, set up a system because people really need this. Okay, so I said, do that, and they wouldn't do it. So I went to City Hall in January to get these abatement applications stamped, and they had a woman who screened you, and she let me in. I told her what I was there for. She was very polite. She let me in. Long and short, nobody was working except there was one guy in the legal office when I knocked, and when I asked him if he would stamp it, he said no. He said, I won't, you're trespassing, you have to leave. So I went into the foyer of the legal office and I said, I'm gonna wait here I'm gonna sit here and wait until you stamp my documents. And they called the police. The police came and said, hey, there's no issue. They sent 5 cruisers, might I add. It was a full force, like a DV incident going on. And they said the police kind of conceded this is ridiculous. At that time, the corporation, a deputy counsel said, hey, just tell her not to, make an appointment, which you didn't need an appointment to come and do what I did. So I was released. And then a month later, they had issued a warrant and arrested me on trespassing charges. So I was handcuffed and put in the cell for 20 minutes until I could get out on, on bail. And then it started a whole series of efforts to try to continue to do these arrests, and none of them were valid. And fortunately, none of them, they weren't able to do them. I subverted them every time. But it was really stressful and burdensome. And when cities or big governments use police force to team with them to sick them on you, it's really unfortunate. Our police department did realize that it was wrong. And I brought a letter because it was so funny to me when I got it. Some of the top management in Nashua wrote letters to the HR risk management department saying, this lady's very frightening. She's scary. I'm afraid she's going to hurt me. I hear her in the hallway, and I can't even come out of my office to go tinkle. She frightens me so much. I can't use the bathroom. I won't pass by her. And I just recently got these letters. I didn't even know they existed, but I started to think, you know what? What are they tracking on me? So I put in a right to know, and I got like 5 letters from top administrators. Now, mind you, the man writing these letters is like 6'3", 250 pounds, 39 years old, and he's afraid he's going to be assaulted by me, And there's no evidence of any violence at all, ever. I haven't said I'm going to box anyone's ears or rip their arm off and beat them with it. I haven't said any of those things. They might, even though they might deserve it, exactly. So I got this police incident report where this guy, COO called the police to say, oh, you know what? We need your presence in City Hall on the 22nd of July, because I was at a board meeting and she told the mayor to shut his pie hole, and which I did. I was frustrated with him. I wanted to say something else, believe me, because I had gone to 3 meetings where the mayor ran them. If we only get 3 minutes of public input, and every meeting he cut me off. He would not give me my 3 minutes. And I was extremely frustrated, and I said, Mr. Mayor, shut your pie hole. And he kept talking, and I said, shut your pie hole. Well, this COO went to another mayor assistant and said, you got to call the police. And we need police presence because I think she's coming tomorrow. And she told the mayor to shut his pie hole. And she wrote a strong word in an email. And this could lead to violence. I mean, this could be a serious situation. So 3 officers came and monitored the building for the morning to make certain that if I showed up, that there was, they could keep me under control. And, that to me is so offensive, honestly. I mean, have we moved past that with women? If we say a bad word, and the mayor announced in that meeting, pie hole is a swear word. Really? And he said, we need to rewrite our public input policy to get control of this type of language. And I said, it's used in a Lizzie McGuire movie, rated G. I don't think it's a swear word. And I don't know where you put your pie, but what are you talking about? What are you talking about? I mean, and then, and this individual called the police and they came. And honestly, the police wrote, when I asked for the records of the police going to City Hall on me, I was shocked at how many times City Hall management called them to be in the building. And I had a sense they were there a lot. And when I would go, if I saw a police car, I would literally hide in my car in the parking lot. And if it took me 30 minutes or more, I would hide and not go into City Hall, to not have an interface or be accused of something, and wait for that officer to come out and leave, and then I'd go in. I always tried to dodge them. I became so fearful that even if I drove down my street and I saw a cop car parked somewhere on my street, I would call the police station and say, are they looking for me? Did I do something wrong? What's going on here? It became really worrisome to me. But this guy, 6'3", 250-pound guy, wrote repeated letters on how his safety was in jeopardy. And, he said, the situation is escalating, and I'm afraid by the time appropriate authorities act to protect me and other employees, it will be too late. Oh, that sounds dramatic. I mean, and I've been doing this for 5 years. They've never had that situation. It's very painful to listen to board members in the chamber read about you, read a 4-page letter that I am the type of person who incites violence. I'm like the January 6th insurrectionists. That's what, when they arrested me, Corporation Counsel for Nashua went out to the papers and said her actions were inspired by the January 6th insurrectionists. I wasn't in war paint. I didn't have zip ties, and I wasn't screaming for Nancy. I was just trying to get some, abatement applications stamped. And when I saw the videos of me, I was actually frightened to look at the videos, the police videos, because I said, God, did I go in aggressive? Did I look angry? And there I am in my yellow pants and purple jacket with papers in my hand, just going dum-da-dum-da-dum. I was so casual. And I go to the administrative office. It's locked. Nobody's working at 9:30 in the morning. Not one soul. I go over to the mayor's office. You see, it's locked, dark, nobody's working. And I end up with no intention to go to the legal office, but I knew they could date time stamp an application. And they should have. It was so simple. So, we all need to protect our rights. And I've had a lot of interface with the court system. I have a lot of concerns about the court system. I think it's extremely burdened. I think there's a lack of clerks and staffing to assist judges. We have a huge state house that writes a lot of legislation every year, and ultimately a lot of this ends up coming into the court to be enforced. Nashua's grown its housing population with new homes. They're building like we're on fire, and it's going to grow the population at least 10%. This all adds to the court system, the county, and the infrastructure of Nashua itself with police and fire. And we haven't accommodated any of that. And Hillsborough Southern Court services a very big area. And the civil side of the court has only 2 civil judges. Rockingham has 4. Nashua has 2. And so I think when I started off in there as a pro se litigant, I had an attorney. I really think when I first filed my case for over a year, I went nowhere. The judge was denying everything through COVID. Only holding telephonic hearings. I did horrible. At that point, I had spent $100,000. I had a good attorney, and he said to me, "This judge doesn't like your case, and he doesn't like you. You might want to fold." And I said, "No." I said, "You told me I had great claims, and I do. These are assessing records. How can we possibly not win for open assessing records when it's the basis for taxes in this state? A heavy basis." I said, "I'm not giving up. I'm not." So I wrote an article, a negative article about the judge, and I published it without telling my lawyer. And he called me up and he said, "We don't usually do that when we have an active case." And I said, "We do when we're losing our active case, and I feel it's wrong." I said, "I'm doing it." And the next scheduled meeting was in court. I got into court face to face, and I really felt like if I could talk to this judge myself or see him. And then at that point, I filed 2 pro se cases myself. I decided I'm going to make that judge hear me, and I'm going to go on my own. And both those cases were the cases involving emails on backup tape, and I ended up winning those at the Supreme Court at the end of last year. And unfortunately, I just had to file another reopening on that because the city isn't delivering those emails. They've put them on the slow path. It's going to take a year or more to get them to me, 2 months of emails. They're now claiming that when a citizen asks for an email, the attachment goes with it. And the attachments are voluminous, and they have to read and redact every attachment page, bait stamp it, insert it, and give you the record. This only started about a year ago in Nashua. When I would ask for emails, they would actually say, "We're not including the attachments. We don't review those. If there's an attachment you're interested with, come back." Well, now they've made it more burdensome to say that we are more burdensome. And I wrote back to them and said, "I don't want the attachments." And they said, "You have no choice. We're going to review every one and bait stamp them and review every page." I was furious. And because of that, they've taken these 2 months of emails and broken them into chunks. And now, 1,200 emails is turning into 10,000 pages of records they got to review. Because of all, they were assessing records. Assessing reports are very voluminous. You got 25,000 parcels of land in Nashua. They run a data disk file on all these properties. You got 3,000 or 4,000 pages of just numbers that are public. My first batch came to me, 3,400 pages. 3,300 pages and change were a public report sitting on the website, all reviewed by the clerk. I was furious. Another 50 pages were spam. They have a very poor junk mail spam filter. So they were MailChimp and Constant Contact. Would you like a plaque for your office? How about a new monogram sweatshirt or a coffee cup? I got 50 pages of those, and I actually got 35 emails I was looking for. So I have to, and it really profoundly angers me that I have to file a suit and go back into court again on something I won at the Supreme Court that I should have access to, and these people are so dug in and entrenched, they won't even work with me to get the records. And the court did, I filed a protective order, I filed a motion for contempt, and I filed a new right to know lawsuit. I said to the judge, pick A, B, or C and get me in as fast as you can. I need to talk to you. So, the courts are very tricky for citizens to use. I'm probably not a great example, even though I fought. All in, I'm about $400,000 into my cases. It's a lot of money, and it's just not right. We need to make this better. We tried to do the ombudsman office. We've got some glitches there. We really do. It's turned out to be challenging. So what I want to just say to you, when you're embroiled in these kinds of things with your government, always remember to try and keep your grace. It's really important. And preserve yourself, preserve your health, physically and mentally. They robbed mine for a while. I feel like I'm coming out of that now. It took me a long time. It took me a long time because it seemed so wrong. So preserve yourself, and slow and steady wins the race. And they follow the same philosophy. They win by losing slowly, and you have to battle that. You have to battle that. And so, yeah, it's been quite an adventure, and I would really like it to come to an end, because I can't believe I've been doing this for 5 years, and I will tell you, nobody more than my husband would like to see it come to an end. He's been enormously patient and generous with our family funds to allow this to go on, but I'm asking a lot. It's a burden, and it's a burden I don't like to see on anyone. So we kind of need to stick together and lean in and push big government with inertia to give us our records, and work with us, because we are them. Thank you.